At our birthday party, her cake had 5 tiers and gold roses. Mine was hidden behind the champagne tower. He got the Vogue cover. I got sent to an institution. All because Julian Mercer, my Julian, chose my sister. But they forgot one thing. You can erase a name. You can't erase a woman who knows the truth. I had always known I was the imperfect twin. Vivian sparkled in designer gowns, graceful, golden, the kind of woman people turn to look at twice. Camille Hartley was the quiet one. The one who recycled the same little black dress for art openings, who chose flats over heels because I was always moving canvases or climbing ladders in museum storage rooms. At our 25th birthday celebration, it was clearer than ever that I was the afterthought. Vivian made her entrance like a Broadway lead, flawless in a custom Dior gown, her heels tapping the polished marble like punctuation marks. Cameras followed her. Laughter blossomed in her wake. I arrived 20 minutes earlier, unnoticed, in a dress I'd worn to 3 gallery receptions and a black shawl to hide the fraying at the hem. The ballroom shimmered with golden lights and champagne towers. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the foyer, and our parents, Thomas and Miranda Hartley, held court beneath the massive Hartley Global crest mounted behind them. Thomas was already 2 glasses into his vintage brut, his booming laugh echoing across the chandeliered ceiling. Miranda sat straight-backed, a pearl choker tight around her neck, smiling like the effort pained her. Vivian's cake was a 5-tiered masterpiece, sculpted with fondant roses, flecked with edible gold. Mine was a quiet, modest chocolate tier tucked into the corner, barely visible, as if the caterers had been told to portion my existence accordingly. "Make a wish, Camille," Miranda said as I leaned over my cake. Her voice was tight, her smile tighter. And what was there to wish for? That my father might acknowledge the Renaissance restoration exhibit I'd spent 2 years curating? That my mother might stop suggesting a few tasteful procedures to help me balance out next to Vivian? I closed my eyes. Blue. "She better not say it aloud," Vivian said with a grin, "or it won't come true." Her teeth gleamed beneath the chandelier's glow, each one perfectly placed. Thomas raised his glass with a smirk. "If Vivian's new Vogue cover drops next week, I'd wish for some of that Hartley instinct to finally wake up in Camille." Laughter rippled through the guests like champagne bubbles, elegant, sharp, and just a touch cruel. They were all Vivian's friends. Our parents' investors. Hartley Global Associates. Not one colleague from the museum had been invited. Not one artist whose work I'd fought to preserve. Not one voice from the life I had carved for myself. That was the Hartley way. Vivian danced. I endured. 3 weeks later I met Julian Mercer. I wasn't expecting anything romantic. It was a benefit gala at the Museum of Modern Art. I was overseeing the art auction, adjusting lighting, ensuring that no one stood too close to the 17th century Dutch oil works. I wore my practical heels, hair pinned in a low twist, clipboard in hand. "Was it your call to soften the lighting on the Vermeer?" he asked. I turned. Elegant. Clean lines. His voice was smooth, his presence quietly commanding. He wore a charcoal suit and rectangular glasses. Not showy. Just intentional. "Yes," I said cautiously. The original pigment was thinning. Preserving the chiaroscuro without bleaching it under gallery LEDs takes precision. His eyes lit up. "It's remarkable. You kept the depth without compromising the grain." I blinked, surprised. Most men at these events talked about yacht models or wine vintages. Julian Mercer talked technique. Conservation. "You actually care about the art," I said before I could stop myself. He smiled. "So earnest." "I do. But I'll admit, I recognized your name on the program." "You mean my sister's name?" "No," he said calmly. "I meant yours. Your dissertation on restoration ethics? We cited it in designing the pigment analysis algorithm for Mercer Innovations preservation software." Took a moment for that to sink in. I was seen. Not as a Hartley. Not as Vivian's twin. Not as the museum's logistics girl. As Camille. Over the next month we met again. 4 times for coffee. Twice for dinner. Once at an obscure exhibition on neoclassical forgery where we argued, good-naturedly, about brushstroke authentication. He never brought up my sister. Never asked about my family. He asked me, about art, about the emotional labor of curation, about the joy of rediscovering lost textures under layers of dust and time. We kissed on the steps of the Met after a sudden spring rain. No paparazzi. No declarations. Just the warmth of his hand on my jaw, the drizzle clinging to our coats, the electricity between us that needed no permission. For the first time in my life I wasn't the second thought. And then there was dinner. A Sunday Hartley tradition filled with roast lamb, monogrammed napkins and wine older than I was. Midway through the second course, Vivian set her knife down. Julian called, she said, casual as ever. He's interested in Hartley Global's downtown commercial blocks. Thomas leaned forward immediately. Finally. That boy has vision. I blinked. He never mentioned that. Vivian smiled, slicing into her steak. He also invited me to the mayor's charity ball next weekend. Silence dropped like a curtain. My fork stopped midair. That's not possible, I said. Vivian tilted her head. What isn't? Julian and I have been seeing each other. For weeks. My mother's glass chimed against the plate. My father's eyes narrowed. Camille, Miranda began gently, are you sure you haven't misread the situation? Julian moves in Vivian's circles. Perhaps he was just being polite. Vivian reached across the table and touched my hand, delicate, patronizing. You've always been a little intense about these things. That night I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for tea. As I passed the study I heard voices. He's intelligent, my father said. But he's still a man. He'll come around. Camille's emotional instability, her obsession with art, it's embarrassing. She's passionate, Julian said, defensive. There's a place in Switzerland, Thomas cut in. Discreet. Active. They specialize in refinement. In realignment. She'll return softer. Easier. I stood frozen in the hallway. And if I agree? Julian asked. You get the deal. And whichever daughter you want. Like we were interchangeable. Like I was collateral. The next morning Julian was in the garden. He texted, please. Let me explain. He wore navy again. Always clean, always composed. Camille, he said as I approached. Please listen. Go on. Your father, he wants control. He doesn't understand you. I never agreed to any of this. How much is he paying you to erase me? I asked. His face flinched. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I whispered. Is this for my own good too? He reached for my shoulder. You're spiraling. You need to. That's when I felt it. A sharp prick in my neck. Something cold flooding my bloodstream. Hands on my back. Footsteps behind me. Julian's face above mine. His mouth moving. Apologies maybe. Excuses. And then the light shattered like broken glass over canvas. And everything went dark. I woke to the low hum of an engine and the scent of leather. My vision was cloudy, the world soft at the edges like I was underwater. My arms felt strangely heavy. When I tried to move them I heard the faint clink of padded restraints. The interior of the vehicle was sleek, the kind of luxury only the ultra-rich could design to feel like a cradle and a coffin all at once. Beyond the tinted window the world was pristine. Snow-capped mountains rolled across the horizon under a painfully blue sky. It would have been beautiful if I hadn't been drugged and transported across international borders like luggage. She's awake, a woman's voice said. Clinical. Detached. A man leaned over me, his white coat sharp against the soft brown leather seats. Miss Hartley, he said in a neutral tone. I'm Dr. Werner. We'll be arriving at the institute shortly. The confusion will pass soon. I tried to form words but my tongue felt foreign in my mouth. Sluggish. Numb. When I finally managed a whisper it came out like static. Where am I? Switzerland, he replied. Celestia Hills Institute for Behavioral Refinement. You've been enrolled in our exclusive wellness program. Wellness program. That phrase might have been amusing if my wrists hadn't been strapped to the seat. The building looked like it had been dropped from a billionaire's Pinterest board. All glass, brushed steel and Scandinavian minimalism. Tucked neatly into the side of a mountain, it had the exact cold perfection of a museum exhibit. Everything was spotless. I was rolled through the automatic doors in a wheelchair, though I wasn't sure if I was too weak to walk or if they simply didn't trust me to. The reception area looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. If hotels came with biometric scanners and security guards who pretended to be polite. A silver-haired man approached with the kind of posture that came from breaking people for a living. "Miss Hartley," he said, offering a hand I didn't take. "I am Dr. Ansel Riker, director of Celestia Hills." He had a faint German accent, clipped and controlled. "We specialize in emotional restructuring and personality optimization for individuals of your standing." "You mean kidnapping and brainwashing?" I asked, my voice raw but steady. He smiled as if I'd complimented his tie. "Your father mentioned your spirited nature. We'll help you channel that energy more productively." They showed me to a suite. Yes, a suite. Beautifully furnished with pale gray walls and sweeping views of the valley. But every surface was rounded, every drawer locked. The windows didn't open. The bathroom door had no lock. The closet contained only 3 identical sets of loungewear. White, soft, sterile. "Your personal items will be returned when appropriate," Dr. Werner said as he gently took my phone, my watch, even the gold clip from my hair. "Dinner is at 6. Tomorrow we begin your plan." Plan? That night, I sat on the edge of the neatly made bed, staring at the quiet terror that was tasteful captivity. They didn't scream or hit. They didn't need to. They smiled. They called you Miss Hartley. They served your medicine with chamomile tea. But the trap was set. Every day began the same. A paper cup of pills. No names, no explanations. If I hesitated, they offered gentle encouragement. If I refused, a nurse would come, always kind, always smiling, and administer them through injection. Within 20 minutes, the fog settled in. My thoughts slowed. My emotions dulled. Everything became muted. After the pills came adjustment sessions. Dr. Riker loved euphemisms. Adjustment therapy involved watching footage. Me at gallery openings talking passionately about Renaissance ethics, museum lectures, paired with visuals of my emotional episodes. Each moment was labeled. Obsession. Volatility. Delusional attachment. They used mild electric pulses, subtle nausea, even noise distortion to recondition emotional triggers. It wasn't therapy. It was engineering. By the end of the first week, I knew the goal. Break me down, smooth me out, rebuild me into something softer. Prettier. More Vivian. "Your artistic nature is admirable," Dr. Riker said during one session, skimming my file, "but impractical. We'll redirect that creativity toward more fitting feminine interests." "Fitting according to whom?" I asked, though my words dragged like sand. He didn't even blink. "Your sister is an excellent example. Vivian has used her sense of beauty to elevate your family's brand. We believe you can do the same, once your traits are refined." I clenched my fists in my lap. They didn't want to help me. They wanted to erase me. It was during my second week that I met Jade Bennett. She slid into the seat beside me during group therapy, her blonde hair chopped into a glossy bob, her posture perfect. She wore a designer cashmere cardigan over the standard loungewear. Subtle rebellion. When Dr. Lehman stepped out to take a call, Jade leaned in and pressed a small folded note into my palm. "Do not trust anyone. They are watching everything." We didn't speak for the rest of the session. We didn't need to. Later that evening during movement therapy, a monitored walk around the glass-walled indoor garden, she came to stand beside me, hands behind her back, eyes forward. "You're Camille Hartley," she said quietly. "From the Hartley global dynasty." "You're not supposed to know that," I replied. She smirked. "They call me Jade Bennett, daughter of Patrick Bennett, Bennett Power Solutions. Her family was on Forbes' top 20. I blinked. "What are you doing here?" "I embarrassed my father," she said. "Got arrested during a protest against one of his offshore drilling projects. Suddenly, I became a liability to the board." She looked up at the perfect skylight. "I've been here 9 months. My stomach turned. They can't just keep us here forever." Jade let out a bitter laugh. "That's what I said. The longer you stay, the more they convince your family that you're broken." Over the next week, she taught me everything. How to fake compliance. How to hide pills under your tongue and spit them into a towel. Which guards skipped rounds. Which surveillance cameras were dummies. Which staff could be manipulated. "We need to find our files," she said one night while we sat cross-legged in her room during relaxation hour. "I want to know what they're really doing to us." 3 nights later, we slipped out during shift change, our heartbeats like war drums in our ears. Jade had memorized a trick her father's tech teams used. With a few quick taps on a maintenance panel, she disabled one hallway camera. My hands trembled as I typed my name into the digital record system. Hartley, Camille. The screen lit up. Payment records from Thomas Hartley. Additional funding from Julian Mercer. My breath caught. There was a full treatment plan under my name, signed, dated and labeled non-consensual behavioral restructuring. Dr. Riker's private notes read. Subject resists reprogramming. High intelligence complicates compliance. Recommend dosage escalation and initiation of Phase 2. Estimated time to full integration, 6 to 8 months. I turned to Jade, my voice hoarse. What's Phase 2? Her face paled. That's when they erase you completely. I stared at her. How do you know? Her eyes filled with a quiet ache. Because I've already lived through it. The girl I used to be, she's gone. And they're still trying to kill what's left. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed, silent and still, the medication I'd hidden burning in my palm like a secret. I had no way out yet. No plan. No allies on the outside. But I had Jade. And I had something else. Rage. The chair beside mine was empty. In the quiet circle of 10 patients inside the glass-walled group therapy room, the absence of Jade Bennett was a silent explosion. There was always a certain symmetry in our formation. 2 rows of chairs, soft cream upholstery, diffused morning light through skylights above. She always sat on my left. She was never late. Never early. So the emptiness hit me like a whisper too loud to ignore. Dr. Lehman didn't pause when he walked in. Miss Bennett has been transferred, he said, scanning the group. She's receiving intensive treatment in our Geneva branch. That was all. No concern. No questions. Not even a blink from the others. That's when I realized, this place hadn't just broken people. It had rearranged them into obedient silence. But I didn't nod. I didn't smile. Because I knew what transferred really meant. That night I broke into her room. It had been cleaned, scrubbed until it smelled of antiseptic and lemon polish. Her clothes were gone. Her books, gone. Even the pressed flowers she'd carefully arranged along her windowsill had vanished, as if her presence had been too much of an inconvenience to remember. But they missed something. Behind the baseboard near the door I saw them, 3 tiny rust-colored specks. Blood. So small, so insignificant to anyone else. But not to me. I dropped to my knees. Not from grief. From the fury that coiled in my stomach like smoke turning to flame. 2 days later I learned the truth. I'd slipped out of meditation hour with a stolen staff jacket and moved into the administrative hallway during a schedule gap. Through the frosted glass I saw Dr. Riker's silhouette. He was calm, of course. Always calm. She was a problem, he said. Resistant. Disruptive. Dr. Werner's voice answered, flatter and colder. Her father was made aware of the risks. ECT was a necessary escalation. Riker sounded bored. Cardiac arrest during neural mapping isn't common, but it's manageable. Official report says transfer. Complications. Keep everything aligned. They moved on to another name. But I couldn't. My stomach twisted. Jade was dead. And they planned to rewrite her story into a neat little lie. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I changed. That very night I rewrote my plan. The original escape idea Jade and I had spent months whispering over? Scrapped. Too exposed. Too dependent on 2 people. I was alone now. And alone I would survive. Step 1. Disappear in plain sight. I became their favorite patient. During adjustment therapy, I quoted their training videos. In private sessions I thanked Dr. Riker for his guidance. I mirrored their language back to them, spoke of femininity, of harmony, of my desire to be more like my sister Vivian. I watched as they lowered their guard. Behind my soft voice and downcast eyes, I mapped every surveillance blind spot. I noted which nurse left keys too close to her tray. I catalogued every door that didn't quite click closed, every hallway with flickering lights the cameras couldn't see. I wasn't healed. I was calculating. And I was running out of time. One morning during creative therapy, I pocketed a pen refill. That afternoon I stole a maintenance key card left unattended on a supply cart. At night I hid my journal under my mattress. coded, encrypted with metaphors drawn from Renaissance restoration techniques. Anyone reading it would see ramblings about pigment layering and varnish depth. But I knew the truth behind every metaphor. I recorded patient names, drug doses, doctor rotations. I built my case. And I waited. The date I chose for my escape wasn't symbolic. It was logical. Friday. 2 guards were scheduled to swap shifts at 2 a.m., and there would be a 90-second surveillance sweep reset between zones 2 and 3. That same night, a system test was scheduled for the south exit keypad. And the weather would drop below freezing. That mattered. Because if I was caught, the snow might cover my blood. At 11:52 p.m. I stood in my suite, dressed in a maintenance jacket, hair tied back, key card taped inside my sleeve. The flash drive I'd stolen from the tech lab sat inside a rolled-up pair of socks. My journal was tucked into the lining of my loungewear pants. And Jade's hand-drawn escape map, creased, faded, was folded into my bra over my heart. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't look like Vivian anymore. She didn't look like Camille Hartley either. She looked like someone new. Someone dangerous. At 2:01 a.m. I stepped into the hallway. No alarms. No voices. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly. I moved quickly, each footstep timed with the patterns I had memorized. Turn. Badge swipe. Hold breath. The door to the records wing clicked open. I didn't waste time. I downloaded my file first. Payment records from my father, signed letters from Julian Mercer approving continued funding, and medical reports listing me as non-compliant, emotionally volatile, requiring restructuring. A footnote chilled me. Phase 2 scheduled. Subject exhibiting false compliance. Initiate at 3 a.m. They had planned to erase me that night. Tonight. I pulled up Jade's file next. No discharge. No death certificate. Just a cold line of text. Procedure incomplete. Transfer terminated. That's when the alarm blared. Security breach detected. Swing. Initiate lockdown. Red lights flooded the corridor, sirens slicing through the stillness. I didn't think. I ran. Down the east hall. Left through the emergency stairwell. Up 2 flights to the maintenance corridor. Boots thundered behind me. I reached the rear tunnel, the one that led to the old generator bay. Jade had said it hadn't been used in years. I prayed she was right. I hit the final door with my shoulder, wrenching it open. Snow hit me like a slap to the face. The alpine wind screamed. Thin slippers offered no protection. But I ran anyway. Down the slope through the trees. My legs burned. My lungs screamed. I could hear the dogs behind me. But I didn't look back. As I knew. If I looked back I wouldn't survive. Branches tore at my skin. My hands were numb. The flash drive slipped from my pocket, but I caught it just in time. I didn't know where I was going. Only that it had to be away. Away from Celestia Hills. Away from the facility where daughters were redesigned and girls were disappeared. Away from the people who once claimed to love me. And somewhere in that endless stretch of moonlit snow, bleeding from my ankle and trembling with cold, I made a promise. To Jade. To myself. If I survived, I wouldn't just escape. I would return. And I would ruin them all. 8 months had passed since I ran barefoot through alpine snow, clutching a stolen flash drive like a lifeline. Now I held a delicate scalpel between my fingers. The gold leaf on the antique frame flaked like dried petals beneath my touch. I worked slowly, the tip of the blade lifting each edge with surgical precision. The 19th century portrait beneath it stared back at me, faded but dignified, just like the women who came here to be restored. Just like me. This quiet little atelier tucked inside Rue de Francs-Bourgeois in Paris had become my sanctuary. The woman who worked here wasn't Camille Hartley. She was Claire Whitmore, a Canadian-born art restorer and part-time forgery specialist with a non-existent online presence, a fabricated academic history, and a perfect French accent honed through months of listening and deliberate correction. Claire didn't come from wealth. Claire didn't have a twin. Claire didn't exist before Celestia Hills, and that was exactly the point. Madame Beaumont, the studio's founder, stood behind me with folded arms and a satisfied smile. "Your attention to detail is exceptional," she said. "The Duval family will be pleased." I smiled faintly. The original artist deserves nothing less. That was my mantra now. Quiet. Purposeful. No flash. No flare. My reflection in the glass cabinet didn't resemble the girl who once stood under glittering chandeliers at Hartley family galas. My hair was shorter now, neatly tucked behind my ears, with a streak of premature silver that I no longer dyed. My cheekbones were more pronounced. I'd lost weight. Not from vanity but from hunger, stress, frostbite. And trauma. Always trauma. The scar on my left shoulder, a gift from the barbed wire fence at the institute, had faded from angry red to pale white. But it pulsed on cold nights, a ghost of pain that never fully left. My hands, though they were steady, they had a purpose again. 3 afternoons a week, I left work early to walk to a discreet office near the Luxembourg Gardens. Inside was Dr. Sophie Lem, a trauma psychiatrist who had agreed to see me under the name Claire and never asked too many questions. My paperwork says I'm recovering from an accident, I told her on our first meeting. Dr. Lem had simply nodded. Then we'll start with that. We never used the word institute. But she knew. I think she always knew. She taught me how to ground myself when panic clawed at my throat in public spaces. How to scan a room for exits. How to distinguish real danger from old fear. Some days I barely spoke. Others I told her stories in pieces, coded like my journal. About a friend who disappeared. About a family who replaced love with strategy. About a place that called itself a wellness center but felt like psychological war. You are healing, she said once. No, I replied. I'm rebuilding. That Thursday I stopped at a quiet cafe on the way home. It was my ritual. Espresso, 1 sugar, back corner table. I placed my tablet beside the sugar bowl and opened a private browser. Claire Whitmore had no social media. No digital footprint. But Camille Hartley still checked. I typed it in. Vivian Hartley. Julian Mercer. Wedding. Hundreds of hits. Their engagement had made the cover of New York Society Weekly. The merger between Mercer Innovations and Hartley Global had sent stock prices soaring. There were articles about the power couple of the decade, speculation about a Vogue exclusive, even a list of honeymoon destinations. The wedding was set for June. At the Hartley estate. The same estate where they tried to erase me. I closed the browser the moment the waiter approached with my drink, shielding the screen like a wound. "Un lettre pour vous, mademoiselle," he said gently, placing a silver tray before me. I blinked. A letter. There was no return address. But the concierge said it was urgent. My breath caught as I stared at the cream-colored envelope. It had no markings. Just one word on the front, written in precise, careful script. Claire. I hadn't told anyone this name. No one but Madame Beaumont. And Dr. Lem. My fingers trembled as I slipped it into my coat pocket and walked home through the drizzle. My apartment in the Marais was modest but sunlit. 5th floor walk-up. 1 bed, 1 kitchen window, 2 locks on the door. It smelled like lavender soap and old stone. I sat at the table, took a deep breath and slid the envelope open. Inside was a thick invitation card trimmed in gold foil. The kind the Hartleys would choose. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas and Miranda Hartley. Request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter. Vivian Hartley. To Mr. Julian Mercer. Saturday, June 17th. At the Hartley Estate, New York. My coffee cup slipped and shattered on the floor. Dark liquid spread across the tiles like a spill of ink. But I didn't move. I stared. How had they found me? Who knew? Then something else slipped out from behind the invitation. A handwritten note. In familiar script. Camille. I respected your wish to disappear. But there are things you don't know. Things I need to say. Face to face. Please come home. Not for them. For the truth. Julian. I sank to the floor. Surrounded by shards of ceramic and the bitter scent of spilled coffee, I sat in silence. My heart was steady but my hands trembled. The invitation alone could have been their way of mocking me. But this, Julian's letter, meant something else. That he was still watching. Still reaching for a version of me he had helped destroy. What hurt the most wasn't fear. It was the small, sharp flutter in my chest. Shame. Because I had once loved him. Because a part of me still remembered the way he said my name when no one else was listening. That night I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Marcel, a contact Madame Beaumont had once introduced me to, a forger who specialized in clean identities for complicated people. I might need to disappear again, I told him. Start preparing something. Just in case. The second call was harder. It was to Dr. Lem. She answered on the second ring. I need to learn how to face the people who hurt me, I said quietly. Because I'm going home. The Hartley estate hadn't changed. The same manicured hedges. The same ivory fountain gurgling in the center courtyard. The same white marble facade, standing cold and proud beneath perfect blue skies. Everything was exactly as I remembered. Except me. I stepped out of the taxi in a tailored navy blazer and dark sunglasses. My hair tucked neatly, my posture unyielding. Claire Whitmore stayed behind in Paris. Today I was Camille Hartley again. Daughter of the house. Daughter they tried to erase. The butler opened the door before I could ring. His mask of professionalism slipped for just a moment. Miss Camille, we were not expecting you. Clearly, I said. The foyer smelled like glass cleaner and wealth. I left my small suitcase by the door and walked through the familiar halls with a calm I didn't feel. Voices floated from the garden. Floral arrangements, catering instructions, laughter. The wedding planners were here. Of course they were. Through the French doors I spotted them. My mother in a pale pink Chanel suit, directing florists with military precision. Vivian, dressed in ivory, flipping through a binder. And Julian. Standing beside my father, glass in hand. He saw me first. His expression fractured. My father followed his gaze. His mouth opened slightly. My mother dropped her clipboard. Camille, she said, brittle as glass. I took off my sunglasses. Hello, Mother, I said. I got the invitation. The silence after my words was almost beautiful. Across the sunlit patio, a florist's hand stilled mid-spray. One of the caterers turned to the planner and murmured something under her breath. The wedding photographer lowered her camera slowly, eyes wide. Vivian's posture, always perfect, faltered for a fraction of a second. Then my mother stepped forward, recovering her poise with rehearsed grace. Darling, she said tightly, voice trembling under the strain of appearances, we had no idea you'd been discharged. Your treatment facility said you checked yourself out. I smiled. I'm sure they did. We've been so worried, she added, pressing a hand to her pearl necklace. We didn't know how to find you. How kind, I said, folding my sunglasses and slipping them into my blazer. Though curiously you didn't try. My father cleared his throat, sharp and commanding. Camille, this is hardly the time. For what? I asked calmly. Truth? Accountability? An adult conversation about how you sent your daughter to be chemically restrained and emotionally dismantled so your favorite could secure a merger. Vivian blinked slowly. You always were dramatic. The Celestia Hills Institute, I said, tilting my head. You helped pick it out, Vivian. Don't pretend you didn't. My mother shifted her weight, eyes darting toward the vendors. Why don't we give the family some privacy, she said, fake cheerful, clapping her hands together. The planner, clearly used to wealthy dysfunction, moved quickly. Of course. Let's move the arrangements to the East Terrace, everyone. Let's give the Hartleys a moment. I stood still as the crew packed up their tools and clipboards. When the last florist disappeared through the hedges, I turned back to them. Julian hadn't spoken. Not once. Not even as I met his eyes. Hello, Julian, I said. Congratulations on the engagement. And the merger. I heard your stock went up 15%. 12, he answered automatically. Then winced. Like realizing how absurd that sounded. Dinner that evening was like being lowered back into warm water, only to find it had frozen over without warning. We sat around the long mahogany table in the formal dining room, just as we had when I was 16 and grounded for refusing to go to a debutante gala. The chandelier glittered overhead. The silverware gleamed. The wine decanted was vintage. Everything was curated to maintain illusion. Have you kept up with your art? My mother asked lightly, carving her duck confit. I took my time answering. I find broken things and make them whole again, I said, slicing into the meat with surgical precision. The metaphor speaks to me. She blinked. My father set down his fork. Art restoration doesn't exactly seem like the best return on investment, considering the education we paid for. I suppose that depends on whether you value the work or the outcome, I replied, smiling. Vivian watched me like I was a wild animal, one that had been declawed but not defanged. Julian didn't speak at all. Just watched. Like he couldn't decide whether I was a ghost or a warning. After dinner, my mother took me aside. I hope you'll stay for the wedding, she said. Are you asking me to play the role of supportive sister? I asked, folding my arms. Smile pretty for the camera? I'm asking you not to undo everything we've built, she said. Vivian deserves this moment. And so do we. I leaned in. You tried to erase me. Her eyes flickered. We tried to help you. You tried to replace me with someone easier to control, I said, voice cool. And now you want me docile again. I want peace, Camille. So did I whispered. But you sent me to a cage. The next morning I found my assigned room. The blue guest room. My old bedroom had been converted into the bridal suite. Of course it had. They'd taken everything from me. My place in the family. My lover. My space. And now I was back, but only on their terms. I unpacked my modest belongings. A single dress, 2 blouses, a plain laptop, and 1 velvet pouch containing photocopies of the most damning evidence. The original files, flash drive, and journal were still locked in a safety deposit box in Paris. But these copies? These were enough to ruin reputations, dissolve contracts, and careers. Just in case. There was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Julian standing there. He looked tired. Not just physically. Worn. Frayed around the edges. May I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped aside. He didn't sit. Didn't speak for a moment. He stood in the middle of the room like a man approaching a firing squad. You seem different, he said. I studied him. This is what betrayal does to a person. Camille. No. You don't get to speak first, I said, cutting him off. You lost that privilege when you signed the transfer papers. I didn't know what they were doing. You funded it. He flinched. Kept going. Phase 2 was scheduled the night I escaped. That's what they call the part where they stop trying to fix you and start erasing you. I didn't know, he said again, softer now. I don't care. He took a breath. I came to say I'm sorry. I stared at him. I came to say that if you ever truly meant what you said to me, at the Guggenheim, in the rain, in the quiet, then you will never speak of it again. Because it doesn't matter now. He didn't argue. Didn't reach for me. Didn't pretend. He nodded. And left. Over the next week I became indispensable. I offered to help Vivian finalize seating arrangements. I walked the grounds with the planner and made suggestions for floral design. I assisted my mother with the dinner menu, reminding her that Julian didn't eat shellfish, because no one else remembered. I asked Vivian which wine Julian preferred with beef, because no one else had paid attention. I played the perfect sister. The recovered, reformed, elegant twin. I smiled often. I nodded at the right moments. I earned their unease. Vivian confronted me on Thursday. We were in the conservatory choosing flowers for the altar. She stared at me over a notebook of options. You've changed, she said finally. I have. She tilted her head. The institute must have worked wonders. I met her eyes. It changed me forever. She didn't ask how. Didn't want to. She simply moved on to the next page. At night, when the house quieted and I returned to the blue room, I opened my laptop and reviewed the timeline. The wedding was in 8 days. But my moment would come before then. My goal wasn't to stop the ceremony. It was to dismantle the empire they'd built atop my silence. During an engagement dinner at the Mercer townhouse, I sat quietly at the long table with other guests. Socialites, business partners, media handlers. Julian's father, Malcolm Mercer, spoke at length about their company's latest innovation. Our behavioral prediction algorithms can anticipate consumer decisions with 87% accuracy, he boasted. Fascinating, I said. Does it work on individuals or only mass behavior? He smiled at me like a child speaking out of turn. Both. But individual profiling requires deeper datasets. Medical records, psychological profiles. From treatment centers? I asked lightly. Pause. Malcolm sipped his wine. Among other sources. I smiled. Good to know. Julian looked away. That night I slipped into my father's home office. Password? Still Vivian's birthday. I went through emails until I found it. The smoking gun. Conversations between Hartley Global, Mercer Innovations, and a third party known only as the Behavioral Modification Research Group. Subject line. Partnership proposal. Advanced human prediction models. Attached. Trial data from Celestia Hills. They had used the institute to map our minds. Not just to erase us. To study us. Emotion. Memory. Resistance. Every breakdown, every sedated scream, every reluctant yes. All fed into a software system designed to predict and profit off of human behavior. I closed the laptop. The weight of what I now held felt like a loaded weapon. And I intended to use it. June 17th arrived like the eye of a storm. The Hartley estate bloomed with extravagance. Gardenias laced each archway, gold-draped chairs lined the lawn, and champagne towers sparkled under the late afternoon sun. Guests whispered and smiled with teeth too white and backs too straight, every word rehearsed for society pages and press releases. Vivian had never looked more perfect. Her gown was a column of silk and Swarovski crystals, clinging to her like she'd been poured into it by ambition itself. Her veil, a dramatic 12 feet of tulle, floated behind her as she stood near the marble fountain for pre-ceremony photos. Julian stood beside her in a hand-stitched tuxedo, the knot of his bow tie so precise it could have been digitally calibrated. His jaw was tight. His eyes, unreadable. I watched from the edge of the courtyard, a serene smile pasted across my face. My dress was matte black. A color Vivian once claimed sucked the light from a room. Good. That was exactly the plan. At 3:58 p.m., guests began to take their seats. The quartet played Debussy's Clair de Lune. The photographer darted between rows, whispering about angles and light balance. The pastor reviewed his cue sheet. A drone hovered discreetly above the treetops to capture aerial footage of the Golden Isle. At 4 p.m. sharp, Vivian stepped forward, arm looped through our father's. Applause murmured like a tide. She was 30 feet from Julian when I moved. My heels echoed on the marble tiles as I stepped into the aisle, cutting directly in front of her. Gasps rippled. Cameras flashed. The music stuttered to a halt. Vivian's lips barely moved. "Camille, what the hell are you doing?" I turned slowly toward the crowd, pulled the small microphone from my clutch and clipped it onto my collar. "Good afternoon," I said, voice calm and cutting. "Before this wedding proceeds, I think it's only fair that the guests know what they're really here to celebrate." The murmuring began instantly. Whispers. Phones lifting. Hands covering mouths. Julian didn't move. Vivian's knuckles turned white around her bouquet. "I'm Camille Hartley," I said, raising my voice only slightly. "The twin you all forgot. The one they erased from the engagement announcement. The one they institutionalized, sedated, and silenced so this wedding, and the business merger attached to it, could proceed without complications." My father stood. "Camille. That's enough." Kept going. "In exchange for billions in stock equity and shared technology, Hartley Global and Mercer Innovations began a private partnership with a third-party think tank known as the Behavioral Modification Research Group. The goal? To use illegal patient profiling and psychological data to develop predictive software that manipulates human decision-making. I held up the flash drive. "This contains confidential emails, signed contracts, and patient trial results. All obtained through my stay at Celestia Hills, also known as Test Facility 08. Someone in the back gasped. A reporter's camera began clicking like a machine gun. I turned toward Julian. "Tell them how many times you signed off on testing schedules. Tell them how many patients died." He didn't speak. He didn't blink. His silence was confession. Vivian lunged forward. "She's lying. She was unstable. She escaped from a facility. She has no proof." "Actually," I said sweetly, "the files have already been transferred to 3 news outlets, a human rights organization in Geneva and the Department of Justice." I turned toward the crowd again. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here for accountability. And to let you all know the kind of people you're doing business with." A woman near the front, a Mercer board member, rose from her chair and slipped away without a word. A man in a tux whispered furiously into his phone. Chaos spread like fire. Vivian's voice turned shrill. "You're ruining everything." "No, Vivian," I said, stepping closer. "I'm ending the lie." Security began to move toward me. But too late. I walked calmly to the center of the aisle and lifted the second microphone I'd hidden in my purse. "This wedding is cancelled," I said. "This empire ends today." The drone still overhead streamed the entire thing live. To over 200,000 viewers. I had hacked it that morning. Within the hour, the stock price for Hartley Global dropped 23%. Mercer Innovations halted trading. By sunset, news anchors across 3 networks were dissecting the footage. Whistleblower bride's twin exposes medical abuse scandal. Camille Hartley, the sister they tried to erase. Celestia Hills Institute under federal investigation. I didn't stay for the fallout. I left as calmly as I'd arrived. Back through the front gates, past the photographers and murmuring guests, slipping into a waiting black car that disappeared into Manhattan traffic. No tears. No goodbye. Not even a glance back. That night my phone vibrated. One new message from an encrypted number. You did it. Jade would have been proud. Pistol. I closed my eyes. For a moment I allowed myself to feel it. Not triumph. Not even peace. Just freedom. The next morning, I watched Vivian's press conference from my apartment in Paris. She wore black, copying me maybe. Or mourning her image. She called me unwell. She denied knowing anything about the Institute's deeper affiliations. She said she'd always wanted to help me. Julian stood behind her, expression like stone. They looked hollow. Like people waiting for the next crack in their porcelain mask. The final piece of the plan unfolded quietly. 2 weeks later, The Atlantic ran a long-form exposé titled, "The Twin They Tried to Erase." How Camille Hartley took down an empire built on silence. It included testimonies from other former patients, emails, signed letters, and a photograph of me, unapologetically unedited, standing at the wedding with a microphone in one hand and a calm expression on my face. It went viral. Not because I was beautiful. Not because I was rich. But because I had survived. And then I'd burn the whole machine down. 2 weeks after the wedding imploded, the Hartley estate caught fire. The official report said it was an electrical malfunction in the West Wing, faulty wiring in the bridal suite Vivian had claimed for herself. But rumors spread faster than flames ever could. Some whispered it was arson. Others blamed sabotage by former investors. I didn't care. What mattered was the symbolism. The house that tried to bury me had finally turned to ash. I stood outside the scorched ruins one morning in a tailored black coat, gloves in my pocket, sunglasses shielding my eyes from the sunrise. The estate was cordoned off, security stationed along the perimeter like sentinels with nowhere left to guard. Vivian stood a few feet away, watching the same smoke curls that rose from the skeleton of our childhood. She didn't look polished anymore. Her usual silk blouse was replaced by an old turtleneck and coat several seasons out of date. Her once glossy hair was pulled back into a tight, unforgiving bun. Quite the metaphor, I murmured, stepping beside her. She didn't answer at first. Just lit a cigarette with trembling hands. You shouldn't be here, she said finally. And yet I am. She exhaled smoke into the frigid air. You got what you wanted. You destroyed us. No, I said. You destroyed yourselves. I just refused to let you do the same to me. Vivian turned toward me, something wild behind her eyes. Do you think I chose this? That I woke up one morning and thought, yes, let's send Camille away, let's let her rot in a cell, let's marry the man she loved? I raised an eyebrow. Didn't you? I did what I had to, she snapped. You always got in the way. You were too emotional, too curious, too idealistic. And it was exhausting always having to clean up after you. I was never the problem, I said, steel in my voice. You just hated that I could see through you. That Julian did too. Her lips curled. He stopped seeing you the moment you became a liability. That's not what his emails say. She froze. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. He loved me. He might have buried it under ambition and fear, but it was there. And you could never stand that. She slapped me. The sound echoed across the rubble. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. You can't hurt me anymore, I said softly. You could sedate me. Strip me. Lock me in a room. Steal my name. But I survived. And now, no matter what you say, people believe me. Vivian's breathing grew ragged. She looked like she wanted to scream, but there were no more mirrors to perform in front of. No more guests. No more applause. Only the silence of ruin. She sank to the cold bench beside the wrought iron gates and buried her face in her hands. Are you here to gloat? She asked hoarsely. No, I said. I'm here to say goodbye. I found Julian the next day. He wasn't hiding. He was sitting alone at the Mercer boardroom, lights off, tie loosened, looking like a man watching his own funeral in real time. His company was in free fall. Investors had pulled out. Class action lawsuits had been filed. And the Department of Justice had frozen key assets pending a full investigation. He looked up when I walked in. His voice was quiet. "I wondered if you'd come. I wanted to see how a man looks after he realizes he sold his soul and still lost everything." He didn't argue. Didn't deny. Just leaned back in the leather chair and stared at me like he couldn't decide whether I was his ghost or his punishment. "I meant what I said in the letter," he said finally. "And yet you never stopped them." I was scared. I nodded slowly. "So was I. But I was alone." "You weren't." He clenched his jaw. "I loved you. You left me in a cage." He stood suddenly, voice rising. "I thought they could help you. I thought, if you went somewhere structured, somewhere private, you'd come back to me." I stared at him. "I did come back. But not for you." His face twisted. "Then why?" I took a step closer. "To remind you what it feels like to lose something you thought would stay silent." He exhaled, defeated. "I'm ruined, Camille." I tilted my head. "Then we're even." The next few weeks blurred. Articles. Headlines. A documentary deal. A human rights organization offering to fund a survivor-led task force against unethical institutions. My name became more than a scandal. It became a symbol. Not of tragedy, but of defiance. Still, I kept my distance from the noise. Let others handle the fame, the interviews. My power wasn't in microphones or camera angles. It was in the files I'd released, the lives I'd saved, and the walls I had cracked wide open. One day I received a package. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Me and Jade sitting on the floor of Celestia Hills, back to back, heads tilted toward each other, laughing at something we no longer remembered. Taped to the back was a note. "You carried the torch. I carried the lens. Jade hadn't died. She'd escaped. And she'd been watching." Months later, I stood on a stage in Geneva, invited to speak at the World Psychological Ethics Forum. My nameplate didn't say victim. It said Camille Hartley, survivor advocate. I wore a midnight blue pantsuit. No jewelry. No embellishments. Just my story, and the hundreds of others like mine. I looked out at the crowd, took a breath, and spoke. Some families inherit wealth. Others pass down silence. Mine tried to give me both. I refused. The sea outside my new apartment whispered like an old friend. Not loud, not commanding, just present. Always present. My balcony overlooked a quiet stretch of coastline in southern Portugal. The cliffs were honey gold, the sky watercolor blue, and the waves never asked me questions. I liked that. I didn't need to explain who I was here. Not Camille Hartley. Not Claire Whitmore. Not the twin who vanished, the girl who came back, or the woman who burned a dynasty to the ground. Just Camille. Simply me. It had been almost a year since the wedding that never happened. In that time, Hartley Global had been dismantled. The Celestia Hills Institute was shut down and now faced prosecution for human experimentation, racketeering, and negligence resulting in patient deaths. The Mercer empire didn't fall overnight, but it fractured. Julian resigned as CEO. Vivian was last seen trying to sign a reality TV deal, which died as quickly as it appeared when public backlash hit like a tidal wave. She faded into obscurity somewhere in Europe, dragging her designer luggage and broken name with her. They were still alive. Still breathing. But they no longer controlled the narrative. And that was enough. The New Dawn Foundation became real 6 months ago. I funded it quietly, through settlement money I received as part of the class action suit and an anonymous donor I suspected was Jade. We provided housing, therapy, and legal aid for survivors of institutional abuse, particularly those from treatment centers that marketed correction as care. The name was deliberate. I didn't want to be the poster child anymore. I wanted to be the one holding the door open. One morning, I arrived at the Lisbon headquarters of New Dawn to find a girl waiting by the glass entrance. She couldn't have been more than 18. Fidgeting. Eyes darting. I recognized the posture immediately. I'd lived it. "Are you Camille?" she asked in a whisper. "Yes," I said gently. "They said you'd believe me even if no one else did." "I will." "I don't remember everything," she stammered, eyes filling with tears. I just know they took my name and they made me feel like I didn't exist. I didn't ask her to explain. I just held out my hand. You don't have to remember it all at once, I said. Just enough to build something new. That night I returned to the apartment, curled up in my reading chair, and opened a package that had arrived earlier. No name, no address, just a small black box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace. The pendant was shaped like a key. No note. But I knew who it was from. Julian. A coward in many ways. But not completely without remorse. I held the key in my palm for a long time. Then I locked it in a drawer. Because I didn't need him to unlock anything anymore. Dr. Sophie Lem still emailed me sometimes. Short messages. Encouraging words. She'd refused payment after I escaped. Said it was her duty, not her job. Her last message simply read, "They tried to erase you. You wrote yourself back in permanent ink." I smiled when I read it. I took up art restoration again, quietly, selectively. I didn't hide my name anymore. Some clients recognized it and tiptoed around it. Others didn't. I didn't care either way. The work was what mattered. I found an 18th century canvas once. Cracked, water-damaged, colors faded. Most saw it as unsalvageable. But beneath the grime and the rot, I saw potential. It wasn't ruined. Just buried. It reminded me of a girl I used to be. Someone soft. Someone curious. Someone who used to believe love could fix everything. She was gone now. But I didn't mourn her. Because I had become someone better. Not by erasing my scars. But by learning how to live with them. On my 32nd birthday, I walked alone along the cliffs, barefoot, with a shawl wrapped tight around my shoulders. The wind tangled my hair. The sea salt stung my lips. I looked out at the horizon and said the names of the girls who didn't get out. Jade. Riley. Serena. Arya. And then I said one more. Camille. Not as an elegy. But as a promise. That she hadn't been broken. Just reshaped. That night I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. They thought they could silence me with sedatives. Replace me with someone easier to polish. They didn't realize I am not porcelain. I am stone. And the wind only sharpens me. The end.